today, the lectionary gospel is probably the longest one ever for any of the lectionary lessons, but it's a very significant one. Now, before I read it, it comes from the Gospel of John. How many of you have ever read very much of the Gospel of John? Have you? Okay. Well, it's very different. It's the last written of the Gospels. It was written in a world that had become very Greek, very Roman intellectually, okay? So to try to understand John, understand these things about it. First of all, it's full, absolutely chock full of symbolism. Not much of it is meant to be taken literally, because if you take something literally, the story, you lose its symbolism, you see? So you have to remember that. Secondly, it's not just intellectual as much as it is written by a playwright. You need to use your imagination when you read the stories in the Gospel of John. You got to try to be a kid again, and close your eyes if you need to, but imagine the story actually happening as if it was on a movie screen or something. Try to imagine the drama in it, because there is a great deal of drama in it, okay? Also, it was written for the time. So we need also, like with every one of the Gospels, to think, okay, if this is what happened to me, if this what was happening then, if this is what it would have meant to the people at that time, what might it mean for us, okay? So this is a long one, so if I run out of breath in the middle, I might have to sit down. Let's see here. Yes, it's the 9th chapter of John. It's actually the entire 9th chapter of John. It's 42 verses in total, okay? As Jesus walked along, he saw a man who was blind from birth. His disciples asked Jesus, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Now, keep that in mind. Who sinned that he was born blind? Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. In him, not to him, in him, okay? We must work the works of God. While it is day, night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When Jesus had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to the man, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So the man went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen the man so many times before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it is someone like him." The man kept saying, "I am that man." But others kept asking him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" The man answered, "The one called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" And he said, "I don't know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened the man's eyes. When the Pharisees also began to ask the man how he had recovered his sight, he said to them, "He put mud in my eyes, then I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?" and they were divided. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened." And the man said, "He is a prophet." The Jews did not believe that this man had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight. And they asked the parents, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is that now he sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." The man's parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore, the man's parents said, "He is of age. Ask him." So for the second time they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." He answered, "I do not know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind and now I see." The Pharisees said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" Then they reviled the man, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." Then the previously blind man answered, "He is an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but God does listen to one who worships him and obeys God's will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered the man, "You were born entirely in sin, and are you trying to teach us?" And they drove the man out. Jesus heard that they had driven the man out, and when he found the man, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir? Tell me so that I may believe in him." Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." The man said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. Jesus said, "I came into the world for judgment, not that so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would not have sinned. But now that you say, 'We see,' your sin remains." Here ends the reading of Scripture. May God grant its meaning to our hearts and our minds. That was long, wasn't it? I don't like the idea of anyone, I don't care what their name is, spitting on the ground, making mud, and sticking it on my eyes. Now, do you? Okay. But you know what else I don't like to think about? I don't like to think about some guy, doesn't matter what his name is, sticking something in my arm, putting me to sleep, and then sticking needles and other things in my shoulder, scraping bone out, taking out cartilage and that, and sewing me up. I don't like that either. I mean, how many of you really want that to happen to you? But boy, can I use my arm now. It's literally better than it's been since I was a kid, because that guy stuck a knife in me. I'm better. I can keep taking myself to the golf course I can keep pretending I know how to golf. See, it had gotten so bad that I couldn't even pretend. But now I can do it again. See, I was blind and now I can see. I couldn't golf and now I still can't. Seriously, wow. Now this is quite a story, but remember I said so much of the Gospel of John is meant to be symbolic. And this is certainly one of those stories. Not only is it the only one of the Gospels in which this story occurs, but it's not so much whether it happened or not, it's the players in the story, okay? It's the back and forth in that story about who says what, who questions what, who takes what stand, and everything like that. So let's think about it in that way. I didn't used to see, but now I do. Can you imagine that, any of you? Being born blind, and then one day, you're already an adult, somehow you start to see. Wow, that's really something. Well, what does seeing mean? What do you think in this story in John? How is the author of this story using that word see? What's it a symbol for? Understand. I see, I revelation. What else? What else am I see? Believe, understand, revealed. How about affirm? Think of that word, I affirm. I newly affirm something I couldn't before. Just keep that in your head, okay? How many of you have taken the trouble to read a book called White Trash? I know one of you has. Maybe you aren't here today. Because somebody, when I told you a long time ago about that book called Hillbilly Elegy, they said, yeah, but you ought to read this book called White Trash when they were leaving. So I read it. I hope you will. Not because it's got a really attractive title, it doesn't. But read it. It's actually a PhD dissertation that was made readable by editors and stuff about English classism and how that was imported to the United States as part of this new world and how it still exists today. It even makes sense out of how racism, black-white racism, and also some Latino white racism, exists alongside classism and hurts a lot of people. So I'm going to ask you, please, if any of you will, read it, White Trash. Now, don't tell me next Sunday you forgot the title. Come on, White Trash, okay? That's what it is. Now, look at it. How many of you think you're in the middle class? Come on, you think you're in the middle class? How many of you want to be in the middle class? I mean, don't you want to be? Don't you? Well, how would you know? How do you know? What are we taught in this country? How do you know whether or not you're in the lower class, middle class, or upper class? Income. Oh, what a great way to decide, huh? Some of the greatest teachers in the world, the greatest ones in the world, whether it be kindergarten or college or graduate school, are poor. Or at least right now they are. They used to be in the middle income, but not anymore. Okay. What makes you rich today? How would you know if you were in the rich, okay? How many of you, upper income? How do you know? Is it the 1/10 of 1%? Is it the 1%? Is it the 10%? Is it the 20%? See, if you're in the top 20%, 80% are below you. So is that the top? You know how you're going to know? Because the people who are really rich are going to tell you that you're rich even if you aren't. Why would that be? Why would that be? Come on. The people that really are rich are going to get you to think, whether you are or not, that you are rich. Why? Come on. Because then you won't try to get richer. Then nothing's going to change for them. Because you see, they see the way things are and they want it like that. And those aren't evil people. Those are human beings. Okay? They see. Now, I would tell you that according to Christian teachings, especially the unassailable teachings of Jesus, they are wrong. But they aren't going to change because they like the way things look to them. They see, but as Jesus said, they're actually blind. Blind to what? Blind to what? Well, a bigger story, a bigger truth. How about this? As I look around today, as most Sundays, just because we're who we are, there's not a black face here. Am I right? Okay. So, how many of you have ever been out traveling and you finally found a motel to stay at and you went up because it didn't say no vacancy? How many of you have ever done that? Any? Not very many, really? Hotels, motels, I don't care. Okay. When you walked up, were you hoping that the color of your skin would not keep you from having a room? No, of course you didn't. You kind of think, what a stupid question, huh? Guess what? If you were black, every time you walked up, you would have to worry about that. Ever think about that? What's that called? White privilege. Yeah. How many of you felt privileged before I just say that? You know, we don't, because what? We're used to it. It's never happened to us, and so why would we even bother thinking about it? Why would we care? Because we're blind to it. Get it? Get it? Really? Because things are that way. Churches are so good. They're just like so many organizations at being blind but claiming they see. What are the telltale words of a church seeing but not seeing? Huh? No. That'd be a good one, but no. It always worked before. We've always done it that way. Okay. I know I've told you this before. I'm going to remind you, though. I really felt privileged to be called to the church in Hartford, Connecticut, even though I did it kicking and screaming that I didn't want to go back into ministry. But it was very diverse, very. Color-wise, culture-wise, income-wise, educational level-wise, male, female, young and old. It was every way of diverse you could imagine. And wow, that was a real treat to be a part of that. But I noticed right after I'd gotten there, I looked at the worship services from 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead, back, and the music they were singing, everything like that. And it sounded just like the dreary old congregational white music that I'd heard ever since I was a kid, that every church I'd ever served, I tried my best not to use, okay? Well, so I didn't want to just impose new music on them. The choir director, organist at that time wasn't very good at it, so we had congregational meetings. Not official ones, but come and talk. We're going to talk about this month worship, the next month service or something like that, okay? So we had the meeting about worship. And this one woman who is one of the pillars of the church, literally worshiped by many of the people in the congregation, she came to that meeting, okay? And there was a discussion, and some black people came to the meeting. Some Latino people came to the meeting, and some young people came to the meeting. So few of them had mentioned, there isn't much music that we can really get into or that we remember from when we were children. Okay? So she stands up and she says, well, if they don't like it, why don't they go to another church? Blind, but believed she saw. She knew because that's what they'd always done. Okay? That's a true story. He said, we think that, that we're colorblind. That means we're racist. Do you understand why I just said that? If you really think you're colorblind, then you're saying, I can't stand the thought that somebody has a different colored skin than I do, so I won't see it, so you're racist. So don't say that again. There is absolutely no truth to it, number one, and there is no virtue to it, number two. There's a really neat saying I saw on the cover of the bulletin today. Did you read it? Doesn't it say something about the beauty of God's creation is in its magnificent diversity or something like that? Something like that. But look at. Yeah, okay, yeah. See? If you can see a person that's a black person and affirm them as a person, remember that word affirm? You might actually be able to see. There's a whole lot of white people walking around that are really being discriminated against. Not because they're white, but because it's convenient to keep them in the same place they've been for the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Convenient for whom? Business owners. Upper class, rich, politicians, because then they can always promise things in the race that they know they're never going to provide. People, what about people that have been working really hard? Just imagine this, okay, imagine this. You've been working really hard for a big company for the last 10 years straight. You really have. You've given them real good attendance records. When you're there, you do what they want you to do, and you do it well, everything like that. And you've not gotten a raise in 10 years. Can you imagine that? Yeah, guess what? It happens all the time here in Lowell. 17? Right there. I'm telling you. We should be picketing in front of that way. What? I'm saying things I shouldn't. Really, 17 years, can you believe that? It's true of one of our own members, a white guy. And you know how hard he works. You know how dependable he is. That's wrong. But how is it justified by politicians and in the paper? Huh? How is it justified? We have to keep our stockholders happy. Because if we don't pay a big dividend, then other companies that pay better dividends, they'll buy that stock instead. Honest, isn't that what it said? It's called the bottom line argument, okay? Those are blind people, according to Jesus. Those are blind people. Remember the parable of the sheep and the goats? That's a mean one. Remember that? It's in the Gospel of Matthew. The sheep and the goats. Which one did you want to be, a sheep or a goat in that story? You want to be a sheep, because remember the King Poobah or whoever comes again and sits on a throne, and all the people of the world come and looks at one and says, okay, you're a sheep, you go that way on my right side. You're a goat, you go that way on the left side. And pretty soon they figured out the goats were going to hell, These were going to heaven in the parable. And so finally, one of the heaven chosen ones said, wait a minute, what did I ever do to deserve this? Remember the answer. Was I naked? When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. When I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was in jail, you visited me. And then the stupid sheep keeps asking, but when did I ever see you like that? Come on, buddy, you're already going to heaven. But he asks, what does Jesus say? When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did it to me. There is the prescription according to Christ. There is the big picture. There is sight. There is affirmation. That's a form of love because it's called distributive justice. Okay? Do you ever hear that from a CEO about the stockholders? Who do you think owns the most stock in General Motors? You don't know, do you? You really don't know? But no? Oil companies. Who do you think owns the most stock in Ford? Oil companies. Right down the list. Did you know that? They are really happy right now because they think all the auto emission standards are going to be thrown out the window. Because then what? Their sale of gasoline will go up. They don't have to make it as clean. The cars don't have to, everybody's going to make more money. And that'll be a good sign because supposedly it'll bring more jobs and more profit to the big companies. But it's blind. According to Christ, it's blind. Because I have unborn great-grandchildren that I will probably never see who might have to wear masks all the time because of the air that they have to breathe. This is last try. It's there. Okay. These are all ugly truths, aren't they? I don't think I'm making you feel very good, and I'm sorry because I don't like not to. But seriously, these are ugly truths of our lives that we live today. We say we're Christians, and we really, I'm convinced, we truly want to be that. We want to live lives where we're giving ourselves to others so they might live. But if somebody else is pushing them down at the same time we're feeding them, if somebody else is keeping them from good jobs at the same time we're teaching them, wow. There's a whole lot of blindness going around. And if we conveniently look the other way, because at least we're doing something good, what's the outcome of that? Nothing ever changes. Good never wins out. I want to hear something about a company as big as Amway that doesn't give raises to its hardest workers for 17 years. Wow. I want to hear something from white people about the problems of racism in the United States of America. I want to hear it. I want to hear it from you and you and you and you and you, and I want you to take the time to learn about it. Learn about white privilege. Learn about what black people face every day. Every day. Just because they're black in America. And if you don't care, remember this story from today, because you need some mud in your eyes. Those with ears to hear, let them hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Amen.